Listen up, fucks. It's Cody J with another fucking episode of Loosen Up, Cucks with Cody J. Let's see what's in the news feed today, or should I call it the cuck feed?
It really is sad that your caricature of conservative comedy is that of a loud, vulgar dude bro, despite none of those things being particularly consistent with either conservatism or comedy.
Oh yeah, we're doing this, home slices. Various slices of homes. Sorry about your homes, but
Man, critiquing conservative comedians is incredibly unfunny.
why aren't there a lot of conservative comedians? Or rather, if you'd prefer, why aren't there a lot of famous conservative comedians today?
Bill Burr, Jeff Foxworthy, Larry the Cable Guy, Tim Allen, Dennis Miller, Terrence Williams, Adam Carolla, Jim Downey, Adam Yenser, Jeff Dunham, Nick DiPaolo, and one of the greatest of all time, Norm Macdonald. Not to mention the comedians that are very quickly coming to realize the horror that leftists are to comedy, like Jerry Seinfeld and even the ever-unfunny Bill Maher.
Humor isn't politically aligned, right?
No, humor is not politically aligned. If it is, you begin to create the Hannah Gadsby's of the comedy world. And no one wants that.
And to be clear, we're not talking about funny entertainers who happen to be Republicans like your Kelsey's Grammer or your David Zucker, but rather comedy that's specifically right-leaning in themes. The Jon Stewart of the right, if
The only comedy that is no longer right-leaning in themes is exactly late-night hosts, which no one, not even yourself, find fun. Anyone who is pushing the envelope about cultural topics instantly become right-leaning due to the nature of political correctness and the overabundance of taken offense.
you will. And just to get it out of the way, there are a lot of shitty, left-leaning comics out there. You may even think I'm one of
At least you can admit it.
late night model alone seems to exclusively function by taking literally any comedian and sucking their funny force like some kind of hot mummy curse.
So you understand that late-night comedy is awful, but ignore that it is almost entirely liberal, and then go on to attack the only conservative late-night host. The rest of them align with you.
Feld is a fundamentally bad comedian.
After spending 3 minutes analyzing a cherry-picked, albeit horrible, joke, you have come to the conclusion that the late-night host that currently gets the highest number of views per night than any other late-night host is fundamentally a bad comedian. I will never argue that he is a good comedian, but the general public certainly thinks he is better than the rest of the late-night hosts on the market.
Not to mention that this whole segment turns out to be about how he's going to buy a gun because he's scared of crime, and how we should all be scared too because the Democrats are planning to destroy the country by purposefully allowing crime?
This would be a much more salient point if California did not decriminalize shoplifting products under $950.
And this is probably the larger issue, which is that political comedy often works best when it's pointing out a truth of some kind. And while there are a lot of harsh truths to be said about Democrats, they aren't, purposefully trying to make crime legal.
22 Walgreens have closed in California because the amount of retail theft is 46 times higher in California than the rest of the United States. This is just a recent example. We could also talk about how liberal district attorneys refused to prosecute violent criminals and rioters during the Summer of Love in 2020.
Gary, get the f*** out of here. Why are you still here? I'll talk to you later.
Making Gary sad.
Getting higher ratings than any other late night talk show host. And that seems like some Twilight Zone shit, right? Is our entire premise to this video wrong? Is conservative comedy actually extremely popular and good?
Wow, I was not expecting you to admit that you were wrong, but I assume you will go on to explain that you are the arbiter of all things comedy, and just because an audience thinks a comic is good does not mean they are actually good. Again, this is not to say that Greg Gutfeld is the peak of comedy, just that this humorless, disheveled man-child has no right to be telling an audience what they think is funny and not funny. I wonder if he is one of the critic reviewers on Rotten Tomatoes who gave Cuties a certified fresh rating.
I'd like to address the elephant in the room. Who, me? I swear to God! You need to go now, alright? You need to go.
Can't I just help with the camera?
I said I would call you later, and I will do that. You need to go now.
Stop being mean to Gary.
Freud's wit and its relation to the unconscious, which pointed out that a joke is only as good as a third party's willingness to accept a joke. And I don't know, that guy f***ed cigars or whatever, but what he's saying is that even the funniest joke falls flat with the wrong audience.
Correct, which is why the only thing that matters when it comes to comedy is your audience's reaction to it. You cannot lecture a crowd into thinking you are funny no matter how good the joke is if they believe it to be humorless.
But the truth is, that equation is backward. And what I mean is that it should be that even the funniest joke falls flat when it's told by someone who has bad intentions.
That is a really ambiguous way to say a joke is not funny if I don't agree with it.
And they've canceled people that are more powerful than me.
They canceled J.K. Rowling. My God, J.K. Rowling wrote all the Harry Potter books by herself. She sold so many books, the Bible worries about her. And they canceled her because she said in an interview, and this is not exactly what she said, but effectually, she said, gender was a fact. I'm Team TERF. I agree. I agree, man. Gender is a fact.
Dave Chappelle's comedy specials on Netflix were absolutely hilarious, and if you have not watched them, you should. Though I wonder if this self-proclaimed comedian thinks Dave's intentions are bad.
First of all, he's conflating gender with sex. Gender is a social construct.
The self-proclaimed comedian is trying to fact-check a successful comedian in a revered comedy special. Once again, if he does not agree with it, it is not funny.
Even if he said sex is a fact, at around 5 weeks, a fetus forms a cluster of cells that can either turn into weird smooth testicles or weird smooth ovaries. And it's a gene.
Apparently it doesn't matter if he was, quote, conflating gender with sex because his opinion's bad, your opinion's good.
Called SRY that activates the former of the two. But that gene isn't a binary on and off function, but rather a sliding scale that can and will sometimes cause a person to be born with neither female or male genitalia.
We call these people intersex, and they make up a grand total of 0.018% of the population. A significant portion of this population eventually develop in either a male or female way when they go through puberty. Anomalies are not the rule. If someone asks you how many fingers a hand has, the answer would be an astounding 5, even though there are plenty of people with 4 fingers or less. We as a society treat the rule as the standard, not the exception.
The point I'm making here is that no, gender is not a fact. It's actually quite slippery according to real science. And I'm not gonna get into all the details, nor do I want to get into this too much, because Dave Chappelle, for starters, isn't a conservative.
Talking about a comedian who is not conservative, despite this video being about why conservatives are not funny.
But he is an objectively successful and subjectively extremely hilarious comedian with very incorrect opinions on transgender people. He claims in this special that he has no problem with the trans community, and I'm sure he believes that, even though he won't shut the f*** up about them.
Holy cow, he is also a mind reader and knows the inner self of Dave Chappelle better than Dave Chappelle does. Also, I wonder if he even watched the special, because the whole point of Dave talking about the trans community is due to the continuous attacks on him from the trans community.
Imagine if a comedian was going around making jokes about how being gay is a choice. It wouldn't matter if the jokes they were making were funny, because the premise they are selling would be fundamentally harmful and wrong.
If a joke is funny, even if it is, quote, harmful, it is still funny. If comedians stopped making jokes that were harmful, everyone would be like a late show host or you, and that is a world no one wants to live in.
Chappelle claims he has no problem with trans people, but is saying things that are factually wrong and designed to discredit them.
Oh, kind of like the things the trans community said about Dave Chappelle.
To quote this Parker Malloy article, I'm not asking comedians to stop telling trans jokes. I'm asking them to stop telling the same trans jokes over and over.
He is on the same side as Amy Schumer and complaining about recycling jokes.
The appeal of someone like Chappelle is that he tells it like it is. That's a whole genre of comedy where the points being made can almost intersect with philosophical truths or political truths, and there are cathartic moments where the comic doesn't even really make a joke so much as say something profound. See Carlin, George.
Over-explaining what good comedians do.
The problem is that this is a very hard thing to do and will go very wrong if the person is, say, incredibly wrong about stuff.
Believes he's the arbiter of correct and incorrect.
Honest to God, environmentalists, quit ripping into me. I am serious when I ask you, how can the planet heating up make it colder? That's all I want to know. Quit telling me what a stupid son of a bitch I am and tell me that.
Hey Dennis, so when the Arctic warms up, that disturbs a circular wind pattern called the polar vortex that moves cold air. Wait, actually, I bet 1 million people already told you this, you stupid son of a bitch! Dennis doesn't make a joke there, because he thinks this rotund truth dump about climate change is huge enough to work on its own.
Unfunny man is jealous that conservative comedian is funny and more successful than he will ever be.
We're talking about conservative humor and why it doesn't work. Specifically, the excuse that liberals simply don't find their humor funny because we're triggered or offended or whatever.
Says this like it is not ridiculous despite his only points being, the people I disagree with are wrong, so they are not funny.
I'm Wes Halula. I'm Ethan Nicole. This is the Babylon Bee News Desk. As President Biden's drone strikes continue to rain down terror on unsuspecting Middle Easterners, many have begun to paint the colors of the transgender flag over their doorposts in hopes that the drone strikes pass them by.
It was discovered that President Biden programmed the drones to ignore homes showing support for transgenderism, and as a result, dozens of lives have been spared, a baker's dozen at most.
Oh, sweet, the Babylon Bee. You thought I didn't see you over there, but I did. See, the joke that they continue in the bit is that Biden is so militaristically pro-trans and therefore bombing anyone who isn't.
Unfunny arbiter of comedy doesn't understand jokes. The joke the Babylon Bee is making is that the Biden administration has had the most disastrous international military expenditure since Benghazi, while at the same time showing the ridiculousness of the international call for the new radical Islamist government to be inclusive despite it being made up entirely of extremist Muslim men. I don't understand why I have to explain this simply formatted joke to someone who is trying to tell me why conservative comedy is bad, so you get an extra cent for that.
The problem is that while Biden has reversed a lot of Trump's shitty policies surrounding the LGBTQ community, he actually hasn't done too much else besides that. And so if you were to make fun of Biden, perhaps you could mock him for presenting as an ally while not putting his money where his mouth is.
This is what you would find funny, because that is your line of beliefs. Conservatives would not find that funny. This is why you cannot be an objective viewer of comedy.
And so going back to why the Bee is less funny, it's at least in part because we all sort of know they're pulling their punches for the GOP while grotesquely demonizing the left. They have a transparent agenda and are clearly angry at Democrats, often to the point that they forget to put satire first.
Unironically doing the exact thing he claims the Babylon Bee does.
I'm going to show you one of their sketches, and I want you to try to figure out what the joke is.
Hey there, you might have heard discussion about CRT, and you might be worried that we teachers are brainwashing your kids with critical race theory. Well, you should be worried. We are absolutely indoctrinating them with this stuff. If you want to know for sure that your kids are being taught CRT in school, look for these 5 signs. Number 1, they call your boss to tell them how racist you are, and they get you fired. Look, if your kid tries to get you canceled because you perpetuate systems of oppressive whiteness by treating all races equally, which is totally racist, they might be learning CRT at school.
So the premise is that these are a series of signs that critical race theory is being taught in your schools, and the joke is that all the signs are over-the-top reactions against appropriation and shame for being white and such. It's an exaggeration, or an irony, used to ridicule a belief, also known as satire.
Forcing me to explain what the joke is again. The joke is that this behavior is absolutely outlandish, and the mere idea that someone would support these ideas being taught to our children is ridiculous. Now, I'm sure you don't believe me that children could ever really be used as thought police as they were in the novel 1984, but there's an article linked in the description describing exactly the horrors children are capable of when surrounded by bad ideas.
Darn tranny. It's always giving me problems with them. That's the last time I drive a Chevy. I'll tell you that. Anyway, this week I changed my gender and went to Planet Fitness.
Does not understand making me explain another joke. The reason this is perceived as funny from a conservative perspective is the idea that as a 6'2", obviously buff man, you can walk into a Planet Fitness and at this point use either locker room without staff so much as batting an eye. But if you lift weights that are heavy and you do not very daintily set them down after a set, you are publicly shamed by the lunk alarm. Also, calling the lunk alarm a safety feature is very telling of your frequency of working out.
So, what's really the punchline or observation here? I will answer that, actually. The punchline is all the people who would then share this on Twitter and say, "What the f*** is this?" The punchline is me, right now, asking what the punchline is.
I'm really tired of repeating this, but not understanding comedy. The worst part about this is that Steven Crowder has repeatedly said that while he does not find certain, very obvious left-wing comedians funny, he is never going to analyze or fact-check someone's jokes because comedy is always subjective. So of course you won't find someone that you very obviously despise funny, because to you, with your worldview, they're not, and that is okay.
It's that I am reacting to it. Conservative comedians have become obsessed with getting a reaction from the left, to the point that they've completely forgotten to say an actual joke.
Believes that he is the center of everyone's attention and that conservative comedians want his love and affection despite him not being a part of their audience.
They do something pointless, often cruel or weird or factually wrong, and laugh when people point out that it's pointless or cruel or weird or factually wrong.
Trying to be the arbiter of comedy. Again.
It's a comedian saying unfunny things to an audience, and then a second audience watching that first audience not laugh and finding that funny. Or in other words,
It's gonna get a comment at Media Matters.
The joke there is, look at this mean or incorrect thing I just said. Boy, that's gonna make people mad.
At this point, I'm going to start adding 10 sins for every joke I have to explain. The joke is that the thing he said before that was a joke, and Media Matters will find it so offensive that they feel the need to write something about it. I'm also adding an extra 10 sins for not showing what he said prior to the Media Matters comment. Finally, let's do an extra 5 for using Steven Crowder content that is 8+ years old.
Because again, if the end result is to make liberals react or go, that's not funny, the easiest way to do that is to not be funny.
No one cares if a liberal thinks they are funny. They only care that they are selling out shows which these people you criticize, en masse, sell out shows.
That's a cartoon released by the Daily Wire, claiming at the end there that until the white folk came around to America, Native Americans only had dream catchers, tomahawks, and cannibalism.
Putting the Daily Wire into the same category as comedy shows and comedians.
The point is that the video is clearly mocking Indigenous Peoples Day and trying, wrongly, to credit Europeans with advancing America.
Unironically believes that Europeans did not create the country known as America.
They say I was punching down on them. Punching down. The fuck does that mean?
What the f*** do you think it means, millionaire comedian Dave Chappelle? The people who think the LGBTQ community has it, like, good now, because they got some rights and more representation, don't really seem to grasp how the last few years compare to all of human history before this moment.
Using non-conservative comedian Dave Chappelle to explain how conservatives are not funny.
Let the fucking trans community have a goddamn motherfucking second to enjoy being slightly more represented in this country, and as this lady pointed out on Twitter, a chance to not be perpetually on the ropes about who they are. Like, maybe trans comedians could have more visibility if they didn't have to spend most of their time responding to this bullshit.
Believing that if you are a so-called protected class, you can neither laugh at yourself nor handle having your community laughed at. Dave Chappelle, the black man who was impoverished as a child, should then not laugh at poor people or black people due to these being protected classes. Unfortunately, this made up most of his special, and it was hilarious.
Even the beacon of edgy humor, Normand 9/11 McDonald, stopped doing transgender jokes because he felt they were both lazy and potentially harmful toward trans people. To quote him directly, "You don't want to have a joke be misunderstood and then someone goes and beats up a trans person."
Using one of the greatest conservative comedians of all time to explain why the non-conservative Dave Chappelle should not tell trans jokes because someone is going to punch a trans person because of jokes, despite Dave Chappelle prefacing and ending his shows with how he wants to be friends with the trans community if they would only stop attacking him.
Point is that we're not hard to make fun of. The average 30-year-old liberal male has the facial hair of a high-tech Viking and the secret misogyny of a regular Viking.
Telling conservatives it is not hard to make fun of liberals while at the same time fact-checking jokes about liberals. This man, with the unkempt, disheveled hair and facial hair, believes he looks like this portrait.
That the unfunny people we've been talking about simply aren't conservatives in the traditional sense, because conservatism in this country has lurched far beyond what other countries would define as right-wing.
Caring about what countries that are worse than America, think about politics in America.
The Blue Collar Comedy Tour, the tour that's been cracking up America, is finally hitting the big screen.
I had the right to remain silent, but I didn't have the ability.
I don't care who you are, that's funny, right? Blue Collar Comedy Tour, the movie.
Comedy is subjective, so maybe the Blue Collar Comedy Tour wasn't your cup of diamond-encrusted panda flesh tea or whatever the common folk drink.
Acknowledging that comedy is subjective, but wasting 50 minutes of my time telling me how comedy is in fact objective.
After all, this is about American conservatism, which sure seems to have veered steadily way more into the right after Trump.
Republicans have not en masse gone farther right, but Democrats en masse have gotten farther left. This graph clearly depicts that Democrats have gone farther and farther left since 2000, and Republicans have stayed largely the same or gotten closer to the center.
See, back when The Daily Show started, it was a comedy show first. Jon Stewart was a comedian by profession. Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, Samantha Bee, John Oliver. They're all comedians who became interested in politics and media criticism.
Identifying any of these people as comedians immediately discredits you from criticizing someone else's comedy preference.
From the right, it was perceived as comedy being weaponized against them. And so in response, they tried to weaponize that back.
The shift that happened in late night comedy was not comedy being weaponized against conservatives. It was the media that was being weaponized against them. As a result of this, conservatives then began creating their own platforms and their own media, which is why right-wing comedy is far more popular than left-wing comedy.
See, the final thing here, and I guess this is conjecture.
This whole video is conjecture.
But the good part is that this creates a bigger tent for a wider variety of people. It creates more push and pull for ideas, which ultimately makes it easier for comedy. So I guess my conclusion is that conservatives, if they really want to get funnier, need to spread out or loosen a bit. Loosen up?
Except don't expand out to gay people, trans people, people not of your race, or any other category that we have monopolized, which if you didn't know, is all of them.
Cucks? See, that's a callback.
You made an 80-minute long video that was so substanceless, I only got 12 minutes of clips that were even worth criticizing.
Now ISIS is #1 on the terrorist charts. If ISIS catches you, they're going to cut your head off. I've seen them do it on YouTube. Don't like.
Hello everyone, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and please leave whatever video, politician, figure, or whatever you'd like me to send next in the comments down below. But for now, I'll leave you with a little hint on who's next. This guy.